Today we are doing one of those basic recipes that we all love, we use often throughout the year, deviled eggs. So what do we always do? Go wash your hands, 2 happy birthdays, and come on back. And our next step is always to read through our ingredients, read through our directions, because we need to know at the beginning of the recipe that we know what we're doing and that we have everything that we need. So let's go through our ingredients. So this recipe calls for 12 eggs. If you don't want to hard boil all 12, you can divide this recipe in half and just do 6 or just do 1 at a time, whatever works. But eggs do stay for a good couple of weeks hard boiled in the fridge. Just write a little B on them after, or you might be trying to crack a hard boiled egg, and that's pretty fun. All right, so we need our 12 eggs, and then adding into that yolk part, you can do whatever you want. This is an option for us. We're going to use a little bit of mayonnaise. We're going to use some Dijon mustard, or today we've just got regular mustard. Dijon just has a little bit of a spicier kick to it if you've got that. And then we've got some salt and some pepper. But we've also got a few other things. So if you like some spiciness to your egg, we have some cayenne pepper, and of course the paprika. That's the part of the deviled eggs that's lightly sprinkled on top, changes it color, but really doesn't add a whole lot of flavor. It's just more for that color. All right, so our directions, of course, we've got hard-boiled eggs, so we've got to boil them first. So how you do that is you're going to put them in a pot. You're going to put enough water to cover it. You're going to put cold water in, not hot, because that shock from coming out of the fridge and going into hot water might crack the eggs. And then you'll see, check this egg out. This is an egg that was cracked, so we've lost a lot of the egg into the water. So you don't want to have that happen too often. So it's cold water, and then you're going to heat it to a boil, and then you're going to turn it down just so that it's simmering. So simmering is those little bubbles around the outside, and you're going to cook it for 10 minutes. 10 minutes makes the perfect hard-boiled egg. Then when it is done, you're going to take it out, you're going to use the lid, you're going to dump the hot water out of it, and then you're going to refill it with cold water. And I do find that every 3 or 4 minutes you have to check that water and you have to give it a stir, because the heat on the eggs is going to warm up the water. So you need to cool it quickly, or else I have heard you get that green ring in between the egg white and the yolk, and we don't want that. Although you can totally eat that, that's not a problem. So put the cold water in, swish it around in a couple of minutes, dump it, and put some more cold water in until it's fully cool after it's been sitting there for a while. So then you're going to crack the eggs and gently peel them, and then you're going to rinse the eggs after you've peeled them, because you don't want any tiny little shell pieces left on the eggs when you go to make those deviled eggs. We're going to slice the eggs in half the length of them, so that when they open up, that yolk is going to pop right out. And then we're going to put the yolk in a small bowl, and then of course we're going to put the whites there, mix the yolk with all of our other ingredients, and then we're going to spoon the yolk mixture into the eggs, and then of course put some paprika on the top so that they can look nice and pretty and very decorated. So let's get started. So we're going to just add our eggs to the bottom of a pot. Now, you can do a couple of different layers. So if you want to do a couple dozen eggs, you can do 2 layers, but the water needs to cover the eggs, so you'd want a bigger pot. So you're going to put the eggs in the bottom of your pot. And that's not very full. I probably could have used a different pot. We have already hard-boiled most of the eggs for you, so I don't have to put all 12 in there. But just to show you. And then you're going to cover those eggs. You don't want to put too much water in, because then you're just going to have to heat up all of that water, right? So, I don't know, it's hard to hold it flat and see in there, but you can see the eggs are just covered with water, not too much, but a couple of centimeters over top. And that was cold water. So then we're going to put that on to high, but we're really going to monitor it. I'm just going to leave the lid off a little bit so I can hear when those bubbles start to happen, because if you boil it with a rolling boil for too long, that's going to slam your eggs together And that's what's going to happen to all your eggs. So we don't want to have a rolling boil for too long. We just get it up to a boil, turn it down to low, and then the little simmering bubbles is the goal for the 10 minutes, and then set your timer. Excellent. So we'll watch those. Perfect. So we can carry on because, of course, Marianne has prepped everything for us. So the proper way to crack them for any egg, even a hard-boiled one, is a flat surface. Don't crack an egg, a not hard-boiled especially, on the side of a bowl, because that makes very small shards. You can see, I don't know if you can see that there, but very small pieces of shell are coming off, even in on the flat surface. So you don't want to crack it on the side of a bowl because you don't want any of those little pieces sticking into the egg white, because biting into a deviled egg and then having that little bit of crunch in your mouth kind of ruins it, doesn't it? So there's no fancy way to take off a shell. You can see, however, that the one that had the air getting in is much easier to peel. I cracked it a couple of times, and then the shell just comes off. Now you see that a lot of the egg boiled out and it was in the pot water. So that's why we don't want to let those boil and hit each other. So it doesn't really matter how you crack it and roll it. I just like to crack and roll the middle of the egg. Now it's very interesting, when you buy eggs at the grocery store, they're at least a week old. I would say a good 2 weeks old, you know, the time it takes to get from the farmer's field into the grocery store. So they peel really easily. The trick is, if you find that if you can ever get farm fresh eggs, then you want to slightly crack the egg with the shell on. Crack it slightly once just so it gets a little crack around the outside, and that lets a little bit of air in, and then it's going to be a little bit easier to peel. But eggs are very, very difficult to peel when they're fresh. All right, so we have peeled these, but I don't know if you can see that very closely, but there is a couple of little bits of shell on there, of course, because the shell was everywhere. So I'm just going to dip them into this water here. And then here is my bowl of cleaned eggs. And that water is going to just take off all the little bits of shell that might be left on. We don't want any surprises. There we go. This one's going to be very interesting to make into a deviled egg. We're already done number 2. We're going to slice all of our eggs, because what we want out of them is the yolks. So just with a knife, it doesn't even have to be a sharp knife, a butter knife works great. And then I just like to take my knife and then get all of the rest of the yolk out. There you are. And then we can put the white right on our platter. So definitely one end to the other. And you can see that this is perfectly cooked. If you cooked it less than 10 minutes, you would have a softer, darker part of the yolk on the inside, and then it's not going to mix well and it's going to be kind of gooey. So that is not what you want. If you do see that, then feel free to make it into the deviled eggs if you want to, or you can eat that differently. You can make that into an egg salad. Doesn't matter. Egg salad is almost the same. It's deviled eggs. But you also smush up the whites. Let's do one more. Oh, there was another piece of shell on that. All right. So again, that yolk has a lot of nutrition in it, lots of healthy fats, lots of vitamins and minerals, so it's pretty sticky. So just using the side of the bowl there, getting out all of that yolk, making sure that you don't, some of these, the yolk isn't in the middle, so make sure that you don't pierce all the way through that white, or else it will be hard to pick up. You've probably picked up a deviled egg that kind of fell apart in your hands. That's because the yolk wasn't on the middle. So there you have it. Excellent. So we've got our whites, we've got our yolks, and now what do? We're going to add some stuff to that yolk. And let's chat for a minute about mayonnaise. Mayonnaise comes in multiple different kinds. Mayonnaise is actually a pasteurized raw egg plus oil plus vinegar and then a few fillers to keep it all together. So depends on what flavor you like. The Miracle Whip tastes very different than the Hellmann's, but it's a very vinegary flavor. What I also wanted to point out was they have now a mayonnaise that is made with extra virgin olive oil, because what I don't like about the typical mayonnaise in the grocery store is that first or second ingredient is typically soybean oil. And soybean oil is just a byproduct and it's a cheap oil. It's not super great quality for us. So if you can take out some of that soybean oil and have it with extra virgin olive oil, as we know, that is the healthiest oil to be eating, then you're already doing something great. So we have the light Miracle Whip or the light Hellmann's. To me, I always try to do full fat everything, because when they take out fat, they have to add other things, and it's usually sugars, to increase that texture in the mouth, to increase that flavor. So I typically go for full fat mayonnaises, but it really doesn't matter depending on the amount that you're using, because today we're not using very much, so we're just going to use the light, and we'll save that for when we're eating maybe an egg salad sandwich. So we've got 1/4 cup of mayonnaise. These jars are always fun to try to get to the bottom of the jar without coating your fingers in mayonnaise. Perfect. So let's put our mayonnaise in. We have 1/4 cup of mayonnaise. We got our egg yolks. And I have to get all that mayonnaise out of there. And just as a reminder too, make sure that your eggs are all cooled before you start that peeling process. Your frustration level will be high if you try to peel a very warm egg, because they do not peel very well at all. So we have our mayonnaise in there. Let's get our mustard. 2 teaspoons of mustard, and I know what a teaspoon looks like, so I'm going to put 1 teaspoon there. 1 teaspoon there, because you'll probably lose more mustard on your teaspoon when you measure it. And our very terrible way, make sure your hands are washed if you have this sort of salt measuring way. Very terrible way of measuring salt. 1/4 teaspoon, you can omit it. Salt is just a way to increase flavor, so you can feel free to leave it out, but it does have a very nice flavor to it when you add the salt. And 1/4 teaspoon pepper. I'd say that's about 1/4 teaspoon. And so I've got a couple other things here that I would like to add. We have some parsley flakes, and that gives it a little bit of a green tinge to it, a nice parsley flavor. So I'm going to do a little, that's probably about 1/8 teaspoon. And I do like a little spice, so I'm going to do some cayenne pepper. And this is 1/4 teaspoon, but not that much. So I'm just going to do 1/2 teaspoon. So we got 1/8 teaspoon in there. And we're going to do paprika, but not till the end. Something I did want to point out, Marianne found this in our cupboard. This is artificial flavored bacon bits. Please do read your ingredient list, because there's no bacon in these bacon bits. And the first ingredient is soy flour, some more of that soy that we don't really need if we don't need it, and vegetable oil, which is soybean as well. And then there's hydrolyzed more soy and corn protein, some yeast extract. So if you have some food sensitivities, always read your ingredients. We're not going to put that in, but if you had some real bacon, you might want to put that in. All right, so what we just have to do is mix this all together. I'm just using the back of this spoon, but I suspect that a fork would work. A potato smasher would work as well. It was just a little bit too big for this bowl, but if you have a bigger bowl or a smaller smasher, that would work great. And sometimes too, the yolks are dry or maybe they're bigger yolks. Maybe it was an extra large egg that you had, and it's ends up being a little dry. Now to me that does look a little dry, so I might add a little bit more mayonnaise to that, because we don't want it, you know, to bite into it and to have it not really tasting nice and smooth in your mouth. So let's add a little mayonnaise to that. Marianne's gonna dunk that in there for me. Thank you. So we had about maybe 1.5 tablespoons, maybe, nope, just about a tablespoon. That's great. Yes, so Marianne lost the other half right in the measuring cup. I feel your pain. All right, so now it's a nice color, right? We have the black pepper flakes, we have the parsley flakes. So now all we have to do is we're going to add the yolk back in. Now, just remember that we want to make this look nice and pretty and a little bit higher than just, you know, what it was like when we took it out, and it was just flush to the whites. But that means you might run out of the egg yolk mixture before you're done all of your eggs. Even though we added some to it, it was only about 1/4 cup, so you can't really add a ton to the eggs. So I will be tedious and do this, and I will meet you back here in just a couple of minutes. All right, welcome back. So you see we've divided up all of our yolk filling really well and spread it all throughout the eggs. So the final step, if you'd like, this is fully optional, is that you can sprinkle some paprika over. So the trick that I like to use is to get a sieve and just to do it in all over really quickly so that you don't get clumps, because it might change the flavor if you get a great big clump of paprika on one of your eggs. But then it's nicely divided up all over everything, and you get a nice little look. Some fancy paprika dotted deviled eggs. And if you don't want to do that, then you can just leave them white. So there you have it, deviled eggs.